Good evening. It's 6:30. We're going to call the regular board meeting to order with a roll call vote. Justin Devaney. Here. Ryan Olson. Here. Brooke Albertson. Amanda Moss. We have a quorum. I need a motion to call the meeting to order. Motion goes to Ryan. Second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes.
Oldham Ramona meeting, call the meeting to order. Roll call vote. Lori Highland. Here. L.D. Hendricks. Brian Hansen. And Carrie Schirnbeck. We do have a quorum. Do I do an action? We don't ever do an action. What's that? Need a motion? Okay. Is there an action? Call the meeting. Well, I did call the meeting. Yeah. Oh.
I'll make a motion.
Lori makes a motion. And all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We will stand up and do the Pledge of Allegiance.
We have an agenda review and approval, so we'll just go through the agenda here. It's pretty short, but presentation regarding potential consolidation, and then after that there'll be public comment, question and answer survey. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Brian Brosnahan. I'm the superintendent and principal here at the Rutland School District. I want to first and foremost thank every single one of you for coming tonight and taking time out of your evening to be here to learn more about the process of where we're at in the consolidation discussion. Obviously, to be able to ask questions and learn more information, express concerns if you have any, and go from there. We basically came to this point, Mr. Tom Oster, who is our consultant, and our committee between the Rutland and Oldham Ramona districts, which is comprised of 14 individuals, 7 from the Rutland district and 7 from the Oldham Ramona district, have come together, and we were kind of at the point to where we felt that it was time for us to obviously have this discussion and open it to you for feedback as well. So before we get to, I guess, the meat and potatoes of turning it over to Mr. Oster here, I do want to lay down, outline a couple of housekeeping notes. Obviously, first and foremost, with the consolidation piece, for a number of individuals, I know that it's a very passionate and emotional topic for them to discuss and talk about. I just want to reiterate that obviously we want to hear your concerns or hear your questions, but obviously we want to do so in the most respectful and considerate manner that we can, so we can have a very productive meeting and informative session. Secondly, for those individuals who are on the live stream, we are live streaming this currently on our YouTube channel. I just wanted to make a couple notes to them, just so that they're involved in the process as well. There will be a Q&A session for those people that are in attendance that will be available to them. For those of you who are online, if you have any questions or comments, please email me, and my email address should be in the comments section, and that will come through to my email address immediately, obviously, and we'll make sure that your question or comment is relayed to Mr. Oster and then relayed to everybody to be heard and responded to. Also, for those individuals that are on the live stream, there will be at the very end, just as those who are physically here, there will be a survey that we are asking for individuals to complete. Again, we value your feedback and would like to hear your thoughts on things. For those that are on the live stream, there will be a link that is provided that will take you to an online survey that is the exact same as what that will be filled out here in the school. So that's where we're at. Finally, before we get started, I did discuss or talk about briefly the committee that has worked very diligently. We've met a number of times, and these committee members have put in a lot of time and effort into this process. And so I do want to recognize those 14 individuals, if I could quickly, before I turn it over to Mr. Oster. Rutland's members, we have 7 of them, as I said. We have our board president, Mr. Tyler Pickard, Mrs. Brooke Albertson, who is a board member, Ms. Crystal Hansen, who is Rutland's business manager, Mrs. Jill Morager, who is in attendance today. She is our first grade teacher here in Rutland. Mrs. Carly Chambers, who is also in attendance. She is our 6 through 12 special education and art teacher. And then we also have a student representative who is a freshman, Miss Hayden Oftedal, who is also in attendance. Thank you for being here very much. Comprising the Oldham Ramonas committee is their board president, Mr. Lance Hageman, Mrs. Lori Highland, who is one of their board members as well, over here. Mr. Michael Fisher, who's up at the front table. He is the Oldham Ramona superintendent. Mr. Andrew Johnson, their principal. Mrs. Cassie Johnson, their business manager. Mrs. Kaylee Stratton, who is the high school math teacher over at Oldham Ramona. And their student representative is Mr. Caden Hoyer. Again, these individuals have put in a lot of additional time to be able to meet with us to discuss this process. So if you would please give them a round of applause, I would appreciate it. So at this point, I will be, I guess, as brief as I can. If you did hear my message yesterday, I apologize for the 3 minutes in length. It get a little bit lengthy. But I do want to welcome up here to the podium and the microphone Mr. Tom Oster, who is helping us through this process. Again, Mr. Tom Oster is the owner of Dakota Educational Consultants, and I will turn the mic over to him for the presentation piece. Mr. Oster.
Good evening. I will follow up Brian's remarks by also saying thank you for being here. It's being Friday night is not lost on us, and so we really appreciate folks being here. I also want to commend the 2 committees, and as Brian said, that there have been hundreds of consolidations across our state over the years, and it is highly emotional. It is very difficult. And I have been thoroughly impressed with this committee. We have gotten as far as we have with very little consternation or arguing or anything like that. And we'll get to the point tonight on the one topic that I'm sure that you're all keenly aware of, and that would be location. If we build a new school, or location if we don't build a new school. Yes. Can you hear me okay? So anyway, we're going to get to that in a bit. I have 6 topics that I want to buzz through here pretty quickly, and then what we want to do is turn it over to you folks to ask questions based on the information that we're going to provide you. Just want to start off by, and could you go ahead and put the map up there of the two districts? Want to start off by kind of following up on Brian's comments about where we've been. We've had 6, 7, 8 meetings of the committee to try and hammer out the details of what the consolidation might look like. The next step in the process is the two boards have to both vote to pass the consolidation plan. That's just step one. Once they do that, then that consolidation plan goes to the Department of Education and Peer, and they look through it with a fine-tooth comb, and I don't want to be yelling at folks. They look at it with a fine-tooth comb, and then if they approve it, then it comes back to the school boards. At that point, the school boards are required to have another public meeting with all of you. And again, I would assume that we would do 3 of them, one in Rutland, one in Oldham, one in Ramona. And then, only then, it would be a vote of the registered voters in each school district. So ultimately, the board can come up with, and the committee can come up with a plan, but you folks are going to be the ones that decide whether it passes or not. So they have the arduous task of trying to come up with something that they think will satisfy the voters in Rutland and satisfy the voters in Oldham Ramona to the extent that they can get it to pass in both districts. If one district votes it down, it's done. It's not going to happen. It doesn't matter if one votes for it, both districts have to pass it or it doesn't pass. If the consolidation passes, then, and we're going to get into this a little bit, then the decision has to be made as to, are we going to build a new school somewhere between the two districts, or are we going to have our students go to the two existing schools and have the elementary in one site and the secondary in the other site? I don't think that's the wishes of the committee, but we have to have a plan B, because if the consolidation passes and the bond doesn't pass to build a new school, then you've got to have a plan. The Department of Education says you have to have a plan for what would you do if it doesn't pass. Okay, so I don't know if you, hopefully you can see that map there, and I'm probably in some of your way. Let me see if I can. Hey, I got an old football voice. I think you can hear me. They can't hear you on a live stream. Oh. Okay, I wanted to stay out of the way so you could see the map. But as you can tell, and some of you are keenly aware of this, you know exactly where you live, but we've got people that are way on the southeast part of the Rutland district and folks that are way on the northwest part of the Oldham Ramona district. And so one of the most difficult parts of this is figuring out where could, if the voters pass the consolidation and if the voters decide to pass the bond, where would be the best location to build the school? So when the committee was looking at options, how did they come up with a couple of different site options? Well, first of all, visited with 12 to 15 landowners, and as you would expect, several of those landowners have no interest whatsoever in selling their land. And so that rules that parcel of land out as soon as someone says, we're not interested in selling. Then the land has to be suitable to build on. So it can't be in a slough, and it has to have proper drainage, and et cetera, et cetera. It has to be somewhere in the geographic center of the two districts. Otherwise, if it's clear to one side, one school district's going to vote against it. If it's clear to the other side, the other school district's going to vote against it. It also needs to be in a location, both school districts are very dependent on open enrolled students. So it has to be located in a location that is still desirable for students to open enroll. It also, we believe, the committee believes that it needs to be on an oil road, on a blacktop road somewhere, not on a gravel road. It would be nice to have it located where the Department of Transportation and Pier would be willing to put in turning lanes so that we would have very safe access to and egress from the school once it's built. If you would put up the next slide. This parcel of land is in the northwest corner of the Nunda and Highway 81 intersection. The northwest corner of the Highway 81 and Nunda intersection. The land is owned by Mr. Wrench, and I want to be crystal clear this evening. We're going to show you two different parcels of land. Neither landowner has agreed to sell this land, but neither landowner has told us no. And so we're looking at these two parcels of land to be a possibility. Nothing has been decided. The committee hasn't chosen anything. These are just two that we know of that the architects have told us that the land is suitable to build on. But again, just to be crystal clear, neither landowner has agreed to sell. Now you can see there, we just plotted out what it could look like. That doesn't mean that's where the field will be or that's where the parking will be. We just did this very off the cuff just to show where that's at. The second parcel is in the northeast corner of Highway 81 and the Ramona Oil. Highway 81 and the Ramona Oil. That parcel of land, again, the landowner has not agreed to sell that land, but they have not told us no. It also, according to the architects, will work. Now you might ask, well, that parcel of land is much closer to Ramona than it is to Rutland. And there's no question about that. But if you look at the graph on the right, you will see that it's 16 miles to Oldham and 11.7 miles to Rutland, and 8.9 miles to Madison, where over 45 students open enroll to your two school districts. If you go back again to the previous, the Nunda corner is 14 miles to Oldham, 6.8 miles to Ramona, 13.8 miles to Rutland, and 11 miles to Madison. It's interesting that either of these locations are closer to Madison than Rutland is to Madison or Ramona is to Madison. And that is important for your district. The other thing, in the age of open enrolled students, parents that see a school are apt to think about opening their students there. But if they can't see the school or they never drive by the school, they might be less apt to think about or talk about open enrolling their students. So there is an advantage of being on Highway 81. You're going to get a lot of traffic past a potential new school. Now I know I've heard this comment before of, well, we don't want a school on top of Highway 81. The school would not be on top of of the highway. Obviously, it would be set back from both Highway 81 and whatever crossroad that it was on. In this particular case, you folks know that the Nunda Oil is an oil road, but going west is a gravel road. That would be part of the plan, would be to oil that however many blocks you would need to oil to get to the driveway that goes into the school, so that you wouldn't be driving on gravel right there by the school. If you go back to the other one, the same would be true here on the Ramona and Highway 81 intersection. It's oil going west, but it's gravel going east. And so again, there would be enough asphalt put in there to take care of that. So we'll come back to that. I'm sure you'll have questions on that. We get asked the question a lot about what will the savings be if the two school districts consolidate. The business managers have spent a great deal of time working on this and trying to figure out what this would look like. If the two school districts consolidate and build in a neutral location, the preliminary estimates are that between the two school districts, they would save $1 million a year. That's a substantial savings when you figure that the current budget, and we're just talking about the general fund, folks, so the current budget combined between the two districts is roughly $4 million. But combined, they could operate roughly at $3 million. So $1 million savings. And I'm going to get to where is that money going to go? If the bond passes, so if the consolidation passes, and then there's a bond vote to build a new school, the estimate is that the bond payment would be about $600,000 a year. You currently, both school districts have opt-outs. An opt-out is a situation where the school has said to the taxpayers, we need more money to operate than what the state has allowed us. And so we're going to ask our taxpayers, could we have some extra? And that's called an opt-out. Again, both districts have one, and Rutland has two. The opt-out in Oldham Ramona is a perpetual opt-out, meaning that it never comes up for a vote. It's grandfathered in. Rutland has an opt-out that's perpetual, that does not have to be revoted on, but they have an additional opt-out that does have to be, or is eligible to be voted on. And so there is a time limit on that. That would have to come up for reconsideration by the school board when that timeline runs out for the Rutland school. If this consolidation passes and the bond passes, the opt-outs for both districts would be eliminated. So the intention will be to reduce your taxes by $660,000 between the two districts. The bond payment, if it should pass, will be $600,000. So the request of revenue from the taxpayers will be less to build a new school than what you're currently paying to operate the two individual schools separately. There will also be money saved in capital outlay because right now, as you would imagine, the maintenance costs on the 100-year-old buildings is much more than it would be on a new constructed building. So what are the major benefits of consolidation for you folks? Well, first and foremost, long-term sustainability. Right now, the Oldham Ramona School District ranks 15th in size out of 149 school districts. So there are only 14 school districts in South Dakota smaller than Oldham Ramona. Rutland ranks 22nd out of 149, so there are 21 school districts smaller. Now, you can tell that there's only a handful of students difference between Oldham, Ramona, and Rutland, so that tells you there are a lot of small schools there on the very bottom end of the enrollment. But combined, two of you combined, you're the 65th largest school district in the state, 65 out of 149. This question has been asked of me, particularly when I was making phone calls to potential landowners, and they said, well, one particular person said, well, I don't know that I'm interested in selling any land to build a new school because I don't know, in 10 years it might not be there. Well, I think if you put it in perspective, if you're the 65th largest school district in the state, a lot of things would have to happen negatively for you not to be there for a long period of time. Other assets of a consolidation besides long-term sustainability. Your students would have additional electives that each individual school cannot afford to offer your students. They just don't have the funding to do it. But combined, because of economy of scale, you'd be able to offer more electives to your students. Your students would get home from school earlier, those that are participating in extracurricular activities. Right now, if they're practicing in Oldham, Ramona, it takes the Rutland students a lot longer to get home. They have to start practice later because they have to travel to the school that's having the practice, and then vice versa when you're in the other site. Obviously, we've already mentioned there'll be a financial savings to the two districts. You'd be able to educate your students in an up-to-date facility that was handicap accessible, that met air quality standards, that would be air conditioned throughout. And then this is the other elephant in the room. And then I'm going to finish with this, and then I'm going to ask for your questions and comments. There's really two big elephants here. One is, if you were to vote to consolidate, where would the new school be built? And I get it. I grew up in a small town. I spent most of my career in small schools. That is a big deal, and it's an emotional deal for folks. And we have to get to a conclusion on that to where both districts might say, well, I don't like it. I wish it were here. But I also understand that the other district has to agree to it as well. And we're going to have that same conversation tomorrow morning in Oldham and then again in Ramona. But the other elephant in the room is, and I'm sure that many of you are thinking about this, is that what happens to the existing facilities? What's going to happen to this facility? And that's a question that we can't put in the consolidation plan. That has to be decided by the newly elected school board. And maybe I should spend a second on that as well. If the consolidation passes, almost immediately after it passes, there'll be another election set up, and it will be for the new school board. So the combined district will now have a new school board, and for a period of a year and a half, you're going to have 3 school boards, because the consolidation won't take effect immediately, and so Oldham, Ramona will still have their board, Rutland, you'll still have your board, and then there'll be the new school district, the ORR board. And then once the consolidation date takes effect, the other boards obviously would go away. Existing school board members can run for the new school board. That new school board will have to make the decisions on what happens to the existing facilities. I do know that there are facilities on both sites that will likely want to be kept, and that particularly bus garages, things of that nature, for storage and current buses, because you're still going to be busing, obviously, and you'll need a location to store those, and we don't want to deadhead buses back and forth to a site. Beyond that, what we've seen, and I can only tell you from what's happened in other school districts where they've consolidated, some communities have taken over buildings, particularly kitchens and commons areas. They're interested in those, gymnasiums. The actual school building itself, I'd be lying to you if I told you there were a lot of possibilities for those buildings. Those 100-year-old buildings that don't meet ADA requirements. Unfortunately, it takes a small fortune to bring those up to, and the minute you start doing any major remodeling of those, you have to bring them up to current day codes. Right now, neither building meets ADA code because they don't have elevators, but you're grandfathered in unless you start remodeling, and then you've got to bring everything up to code. So it's possible that those old buildings, if there were not a buyer or suitor for those, they may have to be demoed. The newer structures, we have talked to somebody that might have an interest in some of the facility here. We've not talked to anybody that has an interest in the Oldham Ramona one as of yet. But clearly, nothing's been advertised, because we don't even know if they're going to be available. I'm going to stop there. I've talked long enough, and we're going to pass the handheld mic around to anybody that has a question, a concern, clarification. Sure. He's got it. Do you have a question?
Oh, just quick, I do have two that came through online, and so I just wanted to pose them. I can run the mic too, Justin, that's no problem. So the first question is it possible to bus students to Rutland, so all students would be bused to Rutland, tear down and rebuild the Oldham Ramona School, and then have that be the ORR school?
Is it possible? Yes. Would it be amenable to the people in Rutland? No.
I could have answered that for you.
Yeah.
And then another question that came through is, what happens if we are unable to secure land between the two school districts? I know there are prospects, as you noted, but nothing is set in stone. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, that's a good question. If neither one of these parcels of land would become available, then, I guess we would have to beat the bushes again. And we've made a lot of phone calls, made a lot of inquiries of folks. My fear is if one of these parcels is not available, and clearly, don't get me wrong, folks, clearly there is land available that somebody would sell, but is it in a location that one school district would say no to and the other district would say yes? And so we are kind of limited to the location that both districts are going to vote yes on. And in even these two pieces, I will guarantee you there's some people on the very southwest or southeast corner of the Rutland School District are not going to like it. And there are going to be people on the very northwest or southwest part of the Oldham Ramona District aren't going to like it. But it has to find some place in the middle and keep the Madison situation in mind. So to answer that person's question, I honestly don't know the answer. We would have to just start over.
So has there been any land that people have offered? For sure.
We've spoken to both of these landowners, and again, I don't want to put any words in anybody's mouth, but I do think that it's possible to purchase either of these.
No, I don't mean about those lands, like outside of those two locations. Has there been anybody that you've reached out to or have offered land?
Not that I'm aware of that, not to me, not that they've came and, or come to us and said, we'll give you our land or we'll sell you our land. I've been told anecdotally that if you get far enough away that there's somebody that might be willing to sell their land. If you are far enough away, or I shouldn't say far enough away, the land that Brian shared with me is that somebody might be willing to sell was so far to the east on the Nunda Oil that it was a non-starter with the Oldham Ramona district.
Was it close to Nunda?
Backup of the two districts. And I think that's one of the problems that we're having, one of the issues that we're having is that folks are thinking about how far is it from Rutland and how far is it from Ramona. But we have to remember that Oldham is every bit as much a part of this as Rutland is, and look at the geographic area of the two districts. So you can see the map. The yellow here is Ramona. The yellow up here is Oldham. This is Nunda. And I can't tell, 9 is section 9 is where Rutland is. I can't read it on my screen.
Okay, so the proposed location of the Nunda corner in 81, does anybody know how far that is from Oldham?
Yes. Can you put the 14.1? And 13.8 to Rutland.
So are we talking like from town, or are we talking families that are in the district that are going to be going to this new school?
This map just shows how far it is from each of the communities. So Rutland, Ramona, Oldham, I don't know what the architects drew it up. I mean, none of these towns are more than a mile long, though. So, yes,
When we talk about fairness, finding a spot in the middle, I like to think of it as what people are already used to driving to get to school. I drive 5 miles to get to Rutland. To get to the the Highway 81, it would be close to 20 miles. So when I think of it, if you're used to driving to Ramona 5 miles, let's add 7 more miles to you, 7 more miles to me. Let's meet in the middle there.
great point. Nobody's arguing that point. I'm just telling you that it doesn't matter if we would put the school where you think would be the best location. By the way, if you go straight west on this oil to Highway 81, we can't build there because that's the Madison School District. So that's not even a possibility. We looked like a mile north of there, or was it a mile or 2 miles? 1 mile. That is part of the Rutland District, 1 mile north. The land's not available. 2 miles north, land's not available. So it isn't that we didn't look at trying to put this further south and closer to Rutland. And you make a great point, and I understand what you're saying, but there's 2 of us coming to the dance. And what we're trying to do as a committee, and believe me, you have board members from Rutland asking the same questions that you're asking. And then we have board members from Oldham and Ramona, our Oldham Ramona School District, saying, you know, kind of the opposite of what you're saying, that we have to consider, because they already consolidated once.
That's not our fault. No, I get that, but they decided that a long time ago. But it doesn't mean that you keep bringing back remote or Oldham. I get it, people drive from Oldham, I get that. But that's a decision they made a long time ago. That's before my kids were born. So you're consolidating Rutland School, I'm talking about Oldham Ramona School, where they decided to go to school in Ramona. Okay, you keep bringing up Oldham, how far it is from Oldham. Oldham's out of the equation right now because there's two schools that you want to, there's two districts that you want to combine. We need to think about that a little bit because you're talking about taking families that live southeast of here, a lot of families live southeast of here, and you're asking 40 kids that are from here, that grandparents are from here, that are going to grow up living here, and you're asking them to drive another 20 miles because it's fair from Oldham that there is no school there. We need to have a neutral location that works for everybody here, not just because it's on US Highway 81. Let's get fair and do this the right way and bring two school districts together. Not Oldham and Ramona and Rutland. You're bringing OR, who decided to put it in Ramona, and you're bringing Rutland. Let's get fair and do it that way.
Okay, and again, great point. Where would you put it?
Yeah, I think sections, or let me see here. Section 22 on,
You want to put the district maps up again?
Nunda, I think that's far enough north.
Well, so you're talking on the Nunda Oil, close to Nunda.
Section 22.
Well, actually, the highway's on the north side of it, right? Oh, is it a mile
So,
into
yeah,
Nunda?
so it'd be about 1-2 miles out of Nunda
Yeah.
on the south side of the road.
Okay. Just 1 second, please. Let's get him the microphone, because otherwise the people on the internet can't hear you.
I'm just curious, since we're talking about location and students enrolled, is there a map that shows the saturation of students that are actually enrolled in the two districts right now that actually attend these schools? I don't know for certain, just hearsay, that a lot of the Oldham kids have enrolled out of the district, so they're not even attending Ramona now. So we're talking about maybe an outlying amount of kids that aren't even in the school, but we're talking about their being a part of the decision about where the school is located. So I'm just wondering, like, does a map exist, or do we know? I mean, I know we have a lot of people that open enroll into the school, but kids that actually are in the Rutland or Oldham Ramona School District that actually physically attend our schools, does something like that exist? Because, like, they just pointed out there's 40-some kids or whatever number was pulled out that are in the southeast corner of Rutland that still attend Rutland. And then we talk about the northwest corner of the Oldham Ramona District, but just from what I've been told, which I don't know if it's true or not, that they don't actually attend Ramona anymore, or very few do. I'm just curious if there's a map that shows the saturation of where the kids live that actually attend our schools.
I don't have that information, and I don't know if the school districts currently have that. I wouldn't think it would be extremely difficult to figure that out, but you
Because
can't.
I know, like, the land is a huge area, and I know that if you just look at the land and think, let's, slap it somewhere in the middle, but if, 80% of the students actually live in a much smaller physical area, and the outliers don't really have that many students, you know what I mean? Like, are we accommodating for two families that have 4 kids on one of the outlying areas, but it might be like a 10 or 20 mile radius, if that makes sense?
It does make sense, but you can't tell me either in 15 or 20 years where the kids will live. I mean, typically, you try to put it somewhere in the center of the districts.
You can't decide, or, we don't know in 20 years, but we know who's voting right now.
Absolutely.
And that makes a difference.
Absolutely. And those Oldham folks, whether they have kids or not, those registered voters will vote.
Right, I understand that, as will people that don't have any kids.
Correct.
Or grandkids or family whatsoever.
Correct. Folks, I get what you're saying, and tomorrow I'm going to hear completely the opposite, and your boards know exactly what you're saying. But the bottom line is that at the end of the day, if Rutland votes this down, it's a done deal, and if Oldham Ramona votes it down, it's a done deal. So that's all I'm asking you to keep in mind, is that I certainly understand why you might want it closer to Nunda. And I can understand why Oldham Ramona School District patrons might want it closer to the center of the two districts. I can hear both sides of it. And I don't have a dog in the fight, but I would like to see you folks get this passed, because I know it's good for you financially, and I know it's good for your kids. Question.
Okay, so if we're talking the future, I was just wondering if we have considered the location to include, for instance, Sioux Valley and Brookings, who we do get students from Brookings. If we've considered how many kids are going to be left out from those areas that come here, and the central location, including those, if we're talking future, I'm thinking we would get students from, if we have a brand new school, we'd get more students from the fringes of those areas that are not being well served, to consider the central location, which would be, like they said, closer to Nunda.
Let's take a look at the map again and look at the yellow box where Nunda is located, and then look at where the western, both northwest and southwest borders are of the other district. Right here is Nunda. Thank you. So you can see the box here is Nunda, and you can see where the northwest corner is and where the southwest corner is. And you make a good point. That would definitely be closer to Sioux Valley, and it would definitely be closer to Brookings. And I can't predict the future, you're right. But all I know is right now, you have far more students from Madison than you do from Brookings, and maybe, one or two from Sioux Valley. Did you still have the mic?
No, I got it over here. Oh, she needed that?
Okay, so then getting back to the saturation point, you keep talking about the saturation of Madison kids in our school. What about the saturation of the southwest corner, Oldham district, in the Madison schools? What about the saturation of the northwest corner, Oldham, Ramona, in Lake Preston, DeSmet, Arlington schools? We have to think about that saturation going that way, just like we have to think about the saturation coming to us.
Are you talking about existing students that are leaving and going to those other schools?
Yes.
But
The future isn't going to change that. With open enrollment,
no, it won't.
That's what we've gotten into. So we cannot count on that. What we need to count on is putting a central location amongst all the other prospering, well-doing schools, a central location, so that we can draw students from those prospering schools in that circle and bring them to a brand new high-class facility.
Okay.
And keep as many students as we have, try to keep all the students we have. which I think if students are older, they will stay with the district probably and go a distance. But these young families with little kids, you're going to lose a lot of the little ones on any of the fringes, no matter what.
Exactly.
But we may gain new, young, future students from the fringes of Sioux Valley and Brookings and those areas too.
Can, before the vote, can like the school board publish some of those numbers as far as like open enrollment of like Brookings students and like Sioux Valley students so that we're kind of informed of that as we go to vote?
Absolutely. In fact, there'll be another public meeting before they can even have a vote. And so, yes, in fact, I don't know if they have it with them tonight, but I know they know how many students are open enrolled from every school.
Correct. Basically, right now, the Rutland School District, I don't know the breakdown exactly by student, for whether it's Madison, Sioux Valley, et cetera, but overall, 46% of our students are open enrolled. The other percentages are from in-district.
You talk about the property lines for the district. What about considering redrawing some of them? Like you said, that northwest corner would be pretty easy to go to Lake Preston and Arlington. We might lose some kids, go to Coleman. Could pick up a lot of kids out of Madison, you know, and same thing, some of them Arlington kids up there from Sioux Valley area could come down also into our district, just redraw them district lines.
That would be great if that was legal, but we can't do that. The only way that you can adjust your district line is what you're talking about doing here tonight. You can consolidate, or you can dissolve and attach, which happens a lot in our state. We've got a lot of small schools that have had the same conversations that you folks are having, and they couldn't agree, and they couldn't get a vote passed, and so they wait and wait and wait, and then they can't operate individually. The last one in South Dakota was 2 years ago. It was Grant Dual School District. You may have played them against or in some activity over the years, but Grant Dual got so small they couldn't operate, and so half the district attached to Millbank, and the other half of the district attached to Clear Lake, and so it no longer exists. But to do what you're saying is not legal. You can't just say, well, Lake Preston, you know, we're going to lop off this much and give it to you. The other thing is you really wouldn't want to do that because it hurts your district financially. Even if you don't have the students, you still have the land, and you're able to use that for your capital outlay to operate your school. But yeah, I get what you're saying, but it's just not legal.
Going back to the open enrollment, you want it on 81 so that people can see it. So are you telling me that our 46% of students drive to Rutland and say, oh, I'm going to bring my kids here?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
You told us earlier today that it needs to be on 81 so it's visible to open enrollees and we can get more students because they're very important to our district.
No, not visible to open enrollees. Visible to people who are driving by it who are not attending your school but may choose to once they see a beautiful new school. It has nothing to do with the existing students. It's trying to attract new students. And the only point I was trying to make is if the school is on the Nunda oil, if it's on the Ramona oil, if it's on a gravel road, it might be more centrally located for somebody, but it's not visible to people that aren't already in your district or in your school.
But they already chose. They already chose to come here
And
before
that's-
a beautiful new school. They weren't choosing us for a beautiful new school.
That's correct. Those students you already have chose you for your school the way it is right now. I'm talking about if you want to maintain sustainability going forward, you might want some additional open enrolled students. The comment was made earlier, and it's an accurate comment. We know this from all other school districts that have consolidated. If you vote to pass this consolidation and build a new school, you're going to lose some students on the fringes. There's going to be some students and parents who decide they're not going to go to school here. Now, I will tell you this, again, talking to schools that have already done what you're doing, far more people say they aren't going to come than actually don't come. But there will be students that don't come as a result of where you're building the school. Doesn't matter where it is. You're going to have some parents that are going to say, that's too far, I don't like it, I'm mad, I'm going to go to Lake Preston, or I'm going to go to Coleman Egan, or I'm going to go to Chester, or whatever. That's a reality, and we know that, and the committee knows that. That's why it's so important to attract new students in the future. I'm confused as to how you think that's in the center of all the prospering schools. It's closer to Brookings and Sioux Valley, that is correct, but it's much further away from Madison. It's further away from Arlington. Like 3 blocks, 3, 4 blocks, yeah. Yeah, as long as it, and the only point there was an oil road is got to be a main road somewhere. And then, yes, if you go off and go a quarter mile north on a gravel road, you pay that just like you would on one of those intersections. Excellent, yeah.
I feel that Highway 81 is just not a good location, too dangerous. You said the US would slow it down and do whatever, but you really want 100 and some kids at 3:30 pulling out onto a major US highway. There's, I don't know, how many wide eye signs already in that stretch from Rutland to Ramona, or even to Nunda, that I don't feel we should be on that major highway with all those kids. You go anywhere else 4 or 5 miles off of that, that gives all that time for them kids to disperse. They're going to go other directions, not everybody going on to Highway 81.
And that's certainly something the committee talked about over and over. Those 2 intersections that we're talking about, the Department of Transportation, whether you consolidate or build a school or not, they're going to put turning lanes on those 2 intersections. So that's going to happen irregardless. They've already, I think 2023, it's on their plan to do that, which is a good thing whether you build a school there or not for safety. But what came up in our committee meeting was that half the students in this school district cross 81 every day right now, just the way you're operating. And then because of your activities, you've got a lot more kids crossing Highway 81 every day. So yeah, half the kids would cross it. There was some even talk about with the engineers and the architects that if you built on the west side of that road, kids that are coming to school in the morning would have the sun at their back, And when they left school in the afternoon, they would have the sun at their back. That was just something else that they brought up for consideration.
There are, excuse me, there are a couple more questions here that were emailed into me. The first one is, it states, what happens to both school districts if the consolidation doesn't happen? Will they both end up dissolving? And if so, then won't people's taxes potentially be higher?
Well, I can't predict the future, but I think if you ask the school administrators, what does your enrollment look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's not promising. You know, I think both districts are in that 150 to 170 student range, and legally, you can operate until you get to 100, and then the state says you can't operate any longer. Financially, that's a question that I would, that would be a taxpayer question. If the opt-outs have to go up again and up again, will the taxpayers tolerate that? Ultimately, it's a school board decision. If you're going to dissolve a school district, then that would go to a vote as well, but I can't answer that question. I think you're much stronger together than you are separate. Just like in any case, I think you're stronger together. I think there's some people in the audience think that I get to decide where this new location of the school is. I don't get to make that decision. You have 14 members on that committee that are ultimately going to make that decision. And honestly, they're not even making the final decision on that. It'll be the new school board that'll make that final decision. But the committee felt like, and I feel like, the patrons needs at least an idea of where it might go, because I think that's the only fair way to have a vote. I don't think it's fair to say, well, we're going to build a new school and we'll figure it out later, because people might vote for that and then be thoroughly upset for the next 50 years about why it was built where it was at. So would it be a lot easier to get this consolidation done if we weren't having this conversation? I think it would be. But I don't think that's right. And again, I don't have a vote on this. It is my job. I was hired by both districts. It's my job to make sure that they're thinking about each other every time we have this meeting. Tomorrow night, tomorrow morning, I'm going to hear the exact opposite of some of these things, and I'm going to have to tell them the same thing, that there's got to be compromise in order to make this work. And I get it. If you're arguing you want it closer to Rutland, you're going to say, well, you should only consider the 2 sites where kids are going to school currently. And you can make that argument. I understand that. But it doesn't matter to the voters that you think that. They're going to vote based on what they think is fair, just like you folks are going to vote on what you think is fair.
There's another one here. It says, what is the timeline for the various votes?
Well, nothing is set in stone. The school boards, at least tentatively, were thinking that they would pass the consolidation plan in November or December. And all that does, folks, is allow them to send it to peer to the Department of Education to get their blessing. Then it has to come back, and there has to be further public meetings, public input, and then you would vote on it. So to answer that person's question, November or December, approve it to send it to peer. Peer gets the okay back to you in January. It would be January or February. You'd be doing public meetings again, and then likely sometime in late February is when you would vote on the consolidation. And again, both districts have to pass it or it goes nowhere.
This is the first time I've looked at the map. It almost looks like Rutland is part of Madison School District. And would Rutland dissolving create I guess the question is, how pliable are the Madison School District lines?
Well, this is the Madison School District, the dark brown. That's Madison. So. No, Rutland is in here. Oh. Yeah. This is Nunda.
Mr. Oster, you follow, I'm right here.
Oh, sorry.
You do a lot with the consolidation of other districts and work with them. Can you tell me, what kind of trends do you see after districts combine? I mean, how far does their enrollment, it will fall a little bit, then does it come back up? Or what are the trends you see with the other districts you've worked on?
Well, it kind of depends on where the location is. So I can give you some examples in the, and I didn't work on this one, but in the 90s, Tripp and Delmont consolidated. And I think that's very similar to the Oldham Ramona district. Tripp and Delmont consolidated, and now they're looking to possibly consolidate again with Armour. Because the population, you know, it's kind of funny. Tripp, South Dakota is a town of 800-900 people, but there's no kids. And they have a ton of their kids that open enroll and go to Parkston. So now another example, and the template that we've kind of been following is Viborg and Hurley. That district is vibrant, and the town of Viborg is growing, Hurley is growing, but they're close enough to Sioux Falls where there's a lot of folks that will commute to Sioux Falls to work, but they want their kids to go to school in a small school. So they're actually doing quite well.
So once a district consolidates, like say Oldham and Ramona, could they ever choose to unconsolidate?
Yes. A great example is T. T School District was part of Lenox, and at one point, you know, people thought the folks in T were crazy. Why would you leave Lenox and split off on your own? Well, of course, now you look at it and go, why in the world did Lenox not build an elementary school in T when they asked them to? Because now T is almost twice the size of the Lenox School District. But they struggle big time in T because they have a very small land base. And so it's very hard for them to build buildings fast enough to accommodate all their growth. But the answer to your question is yes. Any questions from board members or anybody want to make a comment or?
We obviously don't have any students in the district, but one thing you mentioned earlier that if we did have students in the district, you mentioned something about an expanded curriculum. Maybe if you could give us some examples of where that's happened and what they might have been, it would appeal more to parents of the district than the miles they got to drive.
I'm not sure everybody heard that, but I think the question was, or the comment was, it would probably be a good idea to give examples of what the expanded curriculum might look like for the benefit of the students if this were to happen. And I'll lean on that's a great point, and we should have that. I'll lean on the two superintendents to, before we have the next public meeting, to kind of detail what that might look like. Some of it, you know, it will depend on what teachers are available and what have you, but I can tell you in past schools, typically what ends up happening is you can't offer many hands-on courses in our small schools, our very small schools, like ag, like welding, like family and consumer science, things like that. The other thing we can't do very well in our small schools because we can't afford it is fine arts activities. whether it be better band and chorus, or it might be art classes, things of that nature. The other thing that schools often are short on is counseling. And when you combine, you have the assets then to be able to provide counseling services. Large districts obviously have those all the time, but we just, in our very small schools, it's not financially possible. I agree 100%. She said science would be greatly improved with a new facility. Obviously, up-to-date labs. Yeah, that's an absolute no-brainer.
You mentioned what the plan B, or there would be a plan B if there wasn't a land site available. What would that look like?
Well, plan B, I think, and maybe I'm an eternal optimist, I think they'll find land, but the plan B that I was talking about would be if the bond doesn't pass. Because, and again, I'll remind everybody, consolidating is only half the battle. Then the taxpayers have to decide that we're going to get a break because the schools are going to drop their opt-outs if you pass a bond. But if that does not pass, we have to figure out where the kids are going to go to school. Now, on your survey that we're going to ask you to fill out here in a minute, it asks you on there, where would you think the kids should go to school? In that case, we'd still be operating 2 sites, one here and one in Ramona, and one of them's going to have K-5 or K-6, and the other one's going to have 7-12. And I can guarantee you that if I'm a parent and I've got a first grader and I live over on the southeast corner of this district and you tell me they're going to get on a bus and go all the way to Ramona, I'm not going to be happy. And the same is true for those folks going this way. But the Department of Education is going to say to us, you have to tell us what this is going to look like, because you can't guarantee us the bond's going to pass. This came up in the committee meeting, and I'm always paranoid to say something like this, but I'm going to say it. If you are going to say no to the bond, you should probably say no to the consolidation. Because yes, you could save some money by doing that, by having K-6 here and 7-12 there, or K-6 there and 7-12 here. You could save money doing that for your districts, but I'm not sure it would be great for your kids. I'm sorry, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's plan B if the bond doesn't pass. The land thing, again, I think if you folks vote to consolidate, I think we'll find a landowner willing to sell.
I have another concern, considering when all this does get done and we're consolidated and the bond issue has passed, and then it's going to be 2 years before we actually get in the new school. We're not going to have to follow consolidation where for 2 years we're going to have to send our kids one way or the other. We get to stay in our own school for those 2 years.
Yes,
Perfect.
great point. That was one thing that in fact, we still don't have all the details worked out on the timeline, but we do know this. We're going to figure out a way to make it work that if you pass the consolidation vote and if you pass the bond to build the new school, we're not going to upset the apple cart twice. We're going to say, we're going to figure out a way to function, even though we'll be consolidated, we're going to function as a K-12 here and a K-12 there, and we're going to do it for 2 years until we get that school built. And it won't be the most financially feasible thing in the world to do, but we know it's got a very short shelf life. It just wouldn't make any sense to upset the apple cart twice.
can we combine the consolidation vote and the new school bond into one vote? And same with that, at the moment, you've got two sites picked to where the district gets to vote on the two sites, one or the other, instead of just picking one and saying that's where it's gotta go, because
The short answer is no. We tried. We checked with the Department of Revenue and Peer. We checked with attorneys, and we're told you cannot have a bond election for a district that doesn't exist. So if you think about it, we don't have a new district until the consolidation vote passes. And then we have to elect a school board, because only the school board has the authority to take a vote for a bond to the people. So the attorneys are saying you can't pass a bond for a district that doesn't exist, and you can't do it simultaneously because you don't know if it's going to pass. So that's why they told us that you can't do that. As far as the site is concerned, that's not something that can be a public vote on the actual site, but that will be determined by the new school board. Well, my hope is that the committee and the two boards, the two school boards, will agree on a site at least tentatively before you vote on the consolidation. Otherwise, because again, these two boards don't have that authority. It's the new board that has that authority. But, I mean, if you think about it, if these two boards say it's going to be here, I can't imagine, and typically in all these other consolidations, typically the board members of the new school come from the existing boards. It would be pretty unusual for them to say, we don't care what they said, we're going to do this. Again, that's not, the state law dictates what can be voted on and what can't, and that wouldn't rise to the level of being able to be voted on other than the board. The board's elected by the public. I guess what I would say is, if there's somebody that does not like the co-op or thought they should co-op with somebody else, they would have to change the thinking of the board or run for the board. But no, it's a decision made by the school board, and then there are rules for co-ops through the High School Activities Association where typically they have to be locked in for 2 years at a time because they do a lot of the scheduling and they don't want that chaos. You know, I've never seen it happen. I've never seen a consolidated district vote to unconsolidate, if you will. I've seen Yep. Well, my opinion, and I'm just going to give you my opinion, is no. There's a difference, though, between surviving and succeeding. Could Rutland field a basketball team on a given year by themselves without their counterpart? It's possible. They might have to play 7th and 8th graders on the varsity. And so there's a difference between could you do it and could you ever be successful doing it? Is it good for kids? And I would say no. I mean, you have a great thing going with your co-op. It's a wonderful thing, and I hope, irregardless of how this plays out, that's never in jeopardy. You have a really good thing going, and I'm guessing the kids get along great. Every co-op that I've ever been a part of or aware of, the kids get along great. Again, this is anecdotal, and every location is different. I've told the committee, in my humble opinion, I think if the location is, somewhere in the middle of the two districts, I think for every student that you lose, and I would be lying if I didn't think you're going to lose some, but I think you're going to pick up that many because of a brand new shiny school. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with Madison or Sioux Valley or Arlington or Brookings, but there are a lot of parents that came up in small towns and they moved to those larger towns, but they want their kids to be in a small school. They like the student-teacher ratio. They just like that. So I think it'll be a net even at the end of the day, but I have no historical data to say you're going to lose 6% or 8%. Oh, I see I'm sorry. So the state funding formula is designed to have 25 kids in every class. And there are 13 grade levels in a school district. Kindergarten through 12th grade, there's 13. If you take 13 times 25 kids in every class, the ideal size school financially, in peers' eyes, is 325 kids. You'll see that there are schools all the way down to 240, 250 kids. They don't require an opt-out because financially it works. But when you start dropping below that number, that's when you start seeing opt-outs, and the opt-outs get bigger and bigger and bigger as the student numbers get smaller and smaller and smaller, because the funding is based on per pupil. So I think combined, the estimate was 305 kids. So almost to that perfect number. Now, the bigger schools, everything works in increments of 325. But we have some schools in our state that struggle with 450 kids because their class sizes, they have to have 2 sections, but they're not full. So I think you'll be fine. Correct. You could lose 20 kids. I don't think there's any way that's going to happen, but you could lose 20 kids and financially still be in great shape. Yes, you'd build a school based on 325 kids, but then you design it so that what if it grows? You want to design it so that you don't have to redo footings on exterior walls and that type of thing, so that you can always build onto it if the need ever arises. Yes.
You keep saying that bond issue is what's going to be the killer. what magic number are you using to build that new school? Because at the first meeting, it was $18 million. How are we going to build a school for $18 million with everything you had shown there?
Well, first of all, I'm not an architect. I don't know exactly how much it's going to cost, and that's going to kind of be dictated by what the design ends up being. We talked about at that meeting $18 million. Well, I think all of you know what's happened with all kinds of prices since then. So I'm guessing that that might be difficult, but we know that we also have financial limitations. And so the school is going to have to be designed so that we can live within the financial limitations. And that financial limitation is relative to what you're paying now with your opt-out. The committee and the boards have made a commitment to not ask for more money from the taxpayers than what they're currently asking for.
Did I hear that right now? You're looking at a $600,000 bond to build the new school. However, our current opt-out is $660,000 between the two schools?
Right, and to be clear, not a $600,000 bond, a $600,000 payment. Right.
So if we're looking at an average, what is it, 6,000 to 7,000 per student, state money-wise, that's only about, what, 10 students that could leave?
Oh, no,
Are we looking at-
different pots of money.
Perfect, good to know, thank you.
Yeah, different pots of money. So, yeah, capital outlay money and bond money is different than what the general fund operates on.
I have no more.
And maybe I misspoke, but to the gentleman that asked the last question, I'm not sure what is the bigger hurdle, passing the consolidation or passing the bond vote. Pardon me? Actually, your taxes will go down when your bond is paid off because the opt-outs will be gone. Pardon me? It'll be a while. It won't be 40 years, that's not legal, but it will be a while before it's paid off. I will tell you this, folks. If you think that staying the way you are is going to keep your taxes down or lower, take a look at the taxes that are paid in your neighboring districts, and you'll find that, you know, there might be some people that say, let's just close them down and go to Madison, or let's close them down and go to Sioux Valley, or whatever. The taxes aren't any cheaper there.
One of ours is perpetual and the other one is not.
I think individual community meetings were probably a really good place to start, but have you seen other districts go through this where they come together and all the towns meet to have these conversations and try to find some middle ground before the vote happens?
I've not seen it. I can't say that it hasn't happened that way, but I've not seen it. And there's a good reason to do it this way, at least initially, because people are emotional and they do want to make their point, and you know, tomorrow we'll have that same thing, and so it's, at least initially, I think it's a good idea to let people air their concerns. Okay? Oh, question. Depending on how quickly all of this plays out, because we don't know how long Pier will take or whatever. At the very earliest, you could be in a new school in the fall of '24, but it'd be more likely to be the fall of '25. It's still possible, the timeline still works for the fall of '24, and it'll come down to what the committee thinks and what the school boards think on, do they want to start the consolidation next fall, even though you'll still operate individually, because it's a 2-year window from that day the consolidation technically starts on July of '22 or July of '23, then just add 2 years to that. No. During the time the school's getting built, all the Rutland kids stay in Rutland, all the Oldham Ramona kids stay there. That was a kind of a non-negotiable with the committee and the boards, is that we can't force that to go half here and half there. But if the bond fails, then that's a possibility. Right, unless you vote to unconsolidate. Okay, I've kept you long enough, folks. Thank you very much. Again, I know it's emotional and people have strong opinions on this. I'm just hopeful that at the end of the day, we can get the two districts together for the betterment of your students. Unless the board, I think the boards will have to adjourn.
Our next monthly school meeting is Wednesday, November 10th at 5:30 in the Rutland Media Center. I need a motion to adjourn. Second? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes.
While the board is adjourning, these folks are going to pass out a survey, and we'd ask you to fill that out if you wouldn't mind. It just gives more feedback to.
Ask for a motion.
And there's a box to drop them in there, so don't put your name on them or anything like that, but this is just more feedback for the committee. Thank you, folks.
All in favor, say aye.